All right, fans, welcome. Another edition of Ranking the Albums. And today we've got a group here that's one of the best you've ever come across when it comes to ranking the albums, and definitely not an easy thing to do by any means. But to help me do that today, I've brought a special guest in here, first time on the show. Welcome, Mr. David Hens. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So for those who might not be too familiar with you, give them a quick rundown on, what you've done in the music scene here in Western New York.
Yeah, I've been covering the music scene in Western New York since 2009. I wrote for a national website from 2009 to 2015, and then since 2018, I've been running my own site called Music and Other Drugs, where I do interviews with bands and artists, and I also cover live shows.
All right, sounds good. Very good. And we'll get the website up there for everybody at the end so you guys can check it out and see all the great work he's done up to date to this point on the website. For right now, we're gonna go ahead and kick it off here with Led Zeppelin, baby, Led Zeppelin. So we're gonna start off counting them down. We got 8 studio albums to do here. Coda, we're not counting obviously because that wasn't an actual studio release. It was well done
Yeah.
out well after the band had already called it a day, and it was just a compilation of lost tracks and stuff. So, but we are gonna start off with what your number 8 is. So go right ahead for us.
All right, this was a tough call, but I mean, the interesting thing about this catalog is it's really not a bad album. So just because it's at number eight doesn't mean I don't like it. It's just it has to go somewhere. So it was kind of that's so
Exactly.
my number eight is In Through the Outdoor. So it's the last album they made, and they definitely the sound changed dramatically from the first album to the last album. They were kind of transitioning to a lot of different things, and it almost gives you an idea of what they would have sounded like had they continued into the 80s. It kind of foreshadows that sound a little bit with some of the synthesizers they were using. And I mean, I love the way it starts out with In the Evening. That's a great track. And I like the album closer, which is I'm Gonna Crawl. I think that's a great closing. And then in the middle, it's just kind of a mixed bag. I mean, All My Love is a good song. I like the sentiment behind it for Plant writing it about his son dying in 1977. But I don't know. It's not an album that I find myself going back to a lot to re-listen to. But I mean, Carousel Alhambra is another deep track that's actually pretty good. So, but yeah, that's my number eight.
All right, great. Yeah, that's definitely great album there. Like you said, it's you had somebody had to be number 8, and
Mhm. Yeah,
unfortunately that for you that was that one there. Yeah, my Into the Outdoor for me was a little bit lower. I actually picked it at number 4, which like I said, it's a tough call really doing these. Any of these orders can change pretty much anytime. We did this down the road in like another 2 months even. My order would probably be a little bit different somewhere along the lines for sure.
yeah.
And
I
you
think
touched, yeah,
had I done it 10 years ago, it would have been a different order. So
yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah,
yeah,
I was looking at the way mine came out, and I was kind of surprised actually. I didn't realize, that some of the albums that are going to be on the higher end of the list here, I would never expected them to actually be there, but unfortunately that's the case there. But yeah, so for me it was number 4, and pretty much the same type of things that you mentioned here. Great album. There wasn't as many songs on it, unfortunately, compared
yeah,
to some of the other releases. But overall, you touched on a few of the tracks, yeah, in the evening, and that was one of the songs that Robert Plant actually brought back into his solo band when he finally decided to start playing some Zeppelin during his set. And the Southbound Suarez, I really like that one. Hot Dog definitely sounds out of place on this album.
yeah,
Short, but it's sweet, but it just doesn't really fit with the rest of the songs. Kind of the oddball.
hmm
And Carousel Amber, though, that's to me is really it's the longest song in the album. But to me, I really like that song. So the direction they were heading with that one, I could definitely have liked to see a couple more songs in that kind of vein. Would have been killer for sure from this album. And like you said, I'm Gonna Crawl. What a way to close out the album. It kind of reminds you of something that's kind of one of those slower songs, like off of Robert Plant's first solo album in a way.
Yeah.
So that would have fit right at home on that solo album, probably at Pictures at 11. But so yeah, so for me that was the number four, and then so we'll go
Yeah.
ahead
I
and
also
go with
yeah.
your
One last thing on that, I also the solo for Jimmy Page on "Fool in the Rain" is always I also like that a lot.
oh yeah. Yeah, there's Fool in the Rain and All My Love were, I would say those were the two big ones. They got the most radio airplay out of all these songs on, at least in Buffalo here. Don't we know that all too well?
Mm-hmm.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. All right, so we'll go on down to your number seven here.
My number seven is the first album, Led Zeppelin one. Now I like it a lot, and I used to. Had you asked me when I was 16, I probably would have put it in my top three. But I don't find myself going back to it as much. And I mean, it's definitely got that early kind of dirty blues sound with a lot of distortion, and they were still borrowing from a lot of the blues artists that Jimmy Page was familiar with, like Willie Dixon. But and I like Dazed and Confused is killer track, and How Many More Times might be my favorite song on the album. It's the middle section of that song is really cool. But I mean, stuff like Good Times, Bad Times, it's good, but it's not quite on par with the elaborate arrangements or the production that they were getting in some of the later albums. But it's definitely a solid entry.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have like an underrated track on the album at all?
I've always liked "You Shook Me." It's not a song
Okay.
that really gets a lot of radio play, but they used to play live back in the early days.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's definitely one of them. All right, well, you're not gonna believe this one, but my number seven was the same exact album.
Really?
So we match up on that one perfectly. Led Zeppelin one. Yeah, yeah. Somebody's got to be number seven.
Yeah.
Interesting thing with the Zeppelin album here, number one. There's only two Zeppelin albums that never reached number one, oddly enough, on the charts, and this is one of them. Which usually the debuts, when they first come out, usually you don't see the debuts always reaching number one right away. There's not too many artists that can hit number one right out of the gate, but it did reach up to number seven. And oddly enough, would you take a guess at which other album of the catalog that did not reach number one?
Uh,
It's actually
Maybe
Led Zeppelin 4.
well, four, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, it only reached number two, so something kept it off of there. I'm not sure what it is. I didn't get a chance to go back and research it, but that was very interesting. I didn't realize that one myself. But
Mhm.
every other album has made it to number one out of Zeppelin's catalog, including Presence and Three, and just a surprise. You learn something new every day.
Yeah.
So getting back to one, you had mentioned a couple of the tracks that you liked. Obviously, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, classic song.
Mhm.
I know Great White did a great version of that song back in the day when they were
Yeah.
big back in the mid 90s. There it was all over MTV.
Mhm.
Um, Great song, and then a lot of other ones. Your Time Is Gonna Come's probably the one I've always really liked the most on this album, in my take. So those two are the two songs that stood out for me the most. I don't know. I'm not a big blues fan as far as some of the bluesier stuff. I mean, I like
Mhm.
all these songs on this album.
Yeah.
Um, and it's got a good mix though. It's got a couple of those long songs, like you said, "You Shook Me Up" and "Dazed and Confused." But it's also got some of the shorter songs too. So it's
Mhm.
got a good mix. It was definitely exactly what they needed to get noticed. It was the album that helped put them on the map. That's for sure.
Yeah. And communication breakdown is kind of like a proto metal riff for that time was heavy. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. All right, so yeah, so that we agree with number seven. Led Zeppelin one. Let's see what you got for number six there.
my number six is Presence with the Hypnosis album cover there with the black object. Now, I've always Achilles' Last Stand might be one of my top five songs from any album for them, but I just love the Bonham's drumming on that is phenomenal. And and I also T for One is another great blues song that's kind of an extension of what they were trying to do on Since I've Been Loving You from the third album with Jimmy Page's guitar work on that song. and that's an underrated track on here. And I Nobody's Fault But Mine. That's one of the bigger radio hits from the album. But then you have stuff like Candy Store Rock. It's pretty good, but and it. I mean, at the time, it didn't really get a good critical reception, but I think in recent years, it's kind of been reevaluated to be a lot more positive. So, and when you listen to it, it does sound kind of rushed in a lot of ways. With at the time, Plant was going through recovering from a car accident, so I don't even think they ever actually toured on the album. So it was kind of put together hastily, but I mean, a lot of those songs still hold up.
Yeah, it's one of those albums that came in not too many songs on it, only 7 songs. And if I
Yeah,
remember, like you said, Achilles' Last Stand, seems like that one has picked up a lot of airplay over the last 15 years, I'd say. Never heard it too much in the early 80s or mid 80s, but seemed like the song on the radio that you would hear from this album would be Nobody's Fault But Mine is the one that comes to
yeah,
mind out of this one. And that's also one of the songs that they played in concert a bunch of times besides Achilles' Last Stand. But yeah, they didn't really touch this album much in concert either. And as you mentioned, you're number 6. This is actually my number 8. So for me, this is the weakest of the bunch out of the Zeppelin collection. I think if it had a couple more songs on there, I think it would have been better. It's just that to me, there's not really any standout songs like there are on the other Zeppelin albums. That's probably why I rated it lower.
yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I like every song on the album, but they just
Mm-hmm.
don't resonate with me as strongly as, a lot of the other catalog does.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Hot's On for Nowhere. That's another song I remember hearing vaguely on the radio once in a blue moon, but other than that, the radio just never even touched it really. Kind of
No.
odd, so like you said, it's still a solid album regardless.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
just
like Achilles' Last Stand. I know the length probably kept it off the radio a lot too. But
yeah, yeah, it's true. And oddly enough, we always, me and whoever I talk with when we're doing these shows, we always try to think of a band that never really released a bad album. Here they are right here. They never
yeah.
really, this band never really released a really bad stinker or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Every album
Yeah.
has been, solid in one way or the other, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So, yeah, so that's about all I got for the album. Um, so that brings us down already to number 5.
Yeah. My number 5 is the second album, and had I done this list when I was 15, I probably would have put it at number 1. But when I first got into the band as a teenager in the early 2000s, it was like my favorite album. It was my go-to. I mean, a whole lot of love. Bring It On Home. It was just great songs. I was that Jimmy Page is one of the reasons why I got into playing guitar because of this album. So I think it was the first album of theirs I actually owned also. So, but I mean, this is definitely one that's been played to death on the radio too in a lot of ways. So I think that might be why I rated it a little lower on the list, only because I don't find myself going back to it as much. But I still really like it. I mean, What Is and What Should Never Be is probably my number one song on the album.
Yeah, good choice. That's a great song. Yeah, this album for me came in at number, let's see, 5. Yeah, so that I think that's what yours is too here, 5, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so we actually agree on this one. Again, that's two out of the 4 so far. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you just match it up with the rest of the catalog, obviously, like you said, it's got such gems on there. There's a whole lot of love, a lot of radio airplay. I mean, probably the only song that you really don't hear, well, the only 2 songs that really the radio doesn't really touch much, Lemon Song and
Yeah.
maybe Moby Dick. Bring It On Home. That's a classic. I think that's probably the deep cut on the album because that one you definitely don't hear on the radio much either. Bring It On Home, and that's a really great song.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously the other ones, Heartbreaker, Living Loving Maid. It seems like they always play those ones back to back together there the way they do.
Yeah.
And Thank You, great vocal on that song. Definitely a
Yeah.
phenomenal song. So I mean, can't go wrong picking this one anywhere really. But at
Yeah.
this point for us, I guess we chose it as number five. So that just tells you we got some other albums that we feel are even
Yeah.
better than this one. All right, so that brings us to number four.
All right. My number four is House of the Holy. Um, this is an album where they were kind of experimenting with kind of some different vibes, like a little funk, kind of a reggae vibe on like Jamaica and stuff like that. But the guitar tone's much clearer. It's a little less of the heavy blues distortion that Page was using on the early albums. So, and I think like Over the Hills and Far Away is a great track. I love No Quarter is tremendous. Yeah, that's probably, and then like the crunge, that's kind of a funky vibe to it, which they hadn't really done before. That's kind of a deep cut on the album.
Yeah, this album is definitely I was surprised. For me, it came in at number two. Yeah, so I mean, number two for Houses of the Holy. Great album, and I like the one-two punch, the way the album kicks off, going right from the song remains the same right into the rain song.
Mm-hmm.
That's to me that it reminds you of the song remains the same, the album in a way, the way that kicks off there. I feel probably the rain song to me is probably their best overall ballad. I don't know. I
Yeah.
just that song just I can hear that a million times and not be bored with it.
Yep. I know so last time I saw Heart, they played a cover of that, and Ann Wilson sings it as well as anybody. So
Yeah, she sings a lot of good Zeppelin, that's for
yeah.
sure. Yeah, so yeah, the rain song, and then like you said, Over the Hills and Far Away. That was probably the first song I ever actually really fell in love with on the album back when I was younger, when I
Yeah.
first got it. I got a Zeppelin a little bit later. I was probably about 14 or so, but but the Dancing Days, Here Again, that's just great
Mm-hmm.
stuff that this whole
Yeah.
album it made number two for me. I mean, I could play this album all the way through
Yeah.
many times and not be bored with it. It's just one of those great albums that really has stood the test of time. And if you look back on it, this is one of the four albums that reached diamond status by Zeppelin. So
Mm-hmm.
11, it's certified right now at 11 times platinum. So definitely sold many, many copies of it. That's for sure.
Yeah, and then the Ocean is another great track that you hear a lot on the radio too. So
Yeah, I mean this album, like I said, this
yeah.
is one of those classic albums. I mean, I don't think a lot of people you always hear certain albums being mentioned by Zeppelin, as
Mm-hmm.
as being everybody's favorite. So this one you don't hear it as much, although, as we could see, it definitely hit home with us because we got it pretty low here on our lists here.
Yeah.
All right, so where we at now?
On number three,
Number
my number
three.
three is the fourth album. Now it's their biggest selling album. I think it's at like 24 times platinum at the moment. So, and obviously for Stairway to Heaven is the song that most people know, even if they're not a big fan of the band. They've heard that song a million times. So, but I think When the Levee Breaks for me is just as good of a track. Just the production on that song is tremendous. They recorded it at the Heathley Grange, and Jimmy Page put the Bonham's drum set in the bottom of the staircase to get that kind of echo drum sound that is very hard to replicate. So it's not a song you really see too many other bands try to attempt because you can't really do it the same way. And then Black Dog is another big radio hit. So it's it's a great album, and it's like the songs are like every song you hear on the radio. It's kind of ubiquitous at this point, but it's still. I mean, it's a number one of their. It's commonly ranked as their greatest album by a lot of people for a reason. That it is that good.
Well, you're right about that because for me, it actually made my number one here.
Yeah.
It's oddly enough because many of these songs you've heard them over and over and over on the radio, especially the triple trifecta of Black Dog, Rock and Roll, and Stairway to Heaven. I mean, you could probably turn 97 Rock on during the week and you'll hear those songs every single day at some point during the day.
Yeah.
It's just, but as often as you hear some of those songs, I think it's what it is the other songs on it that really complement them quite well. With the Battle of Evermore.
Yeah. Sandy
Just
Denny's vocal on that's terrific. Yeah.
yep, yep. And then I actually like Misty Mountain Hop. That's probably my favorite deep cut on the album. It didn't get a lot of airplay, but obviously a lot of people, everybody knows Misty Mountain Hop, and they actually did that song. I believe it was on one of the reunions. Surprisingly, they actually did it. Um, so it's just kind of it was an important song for them as well. Um, going to California, so just great stuff. Four Sticks is one that kind of is the I would say it's probably the least favorite on the album for many people, but if you listen to that song now, with all the other ones being played as often as they are, I think you'll find it quite refreshing. And that's like you said, you went back and listened to these albums again because some of them you haven't heard them in a long time, all the
Yeah.
way through, because you're used to hearing certain songs on the radio all the time, but sometimes when you go back and listen to these rarer tracks that you don't hear on the radio, it just makes them appreciate them that much more.
Hmm.
So that was definitely one of them. And then When the Levee Breaks, like you mentioned, that's a great song. Probably one of Bonham's probably best drumming songs
Yeah.
out of the whole catalog, I would have to say. It's definitely right up there with a lot of them, that's for sure. And 24 times platinum, you can't go wrong with that. So that was my top choice, and I think that's going to leave us with two now on our list
Yeah.
here. So let's see what you got for your number two
Yeah.
here.
My number two is the third album. This one's become one of my favorites in the last 5 years or so. I've really gotten into it. I mean, I think it was kind of a interesting experimentation for them at the time. It kind of opened up a lot of possibilities for what they would do on the later albums with the different instrumentation and things. And I mean, with the acoustic sound, I think like that's the way. It might be my favorite song on the album. I just think it's a great ballad. Plant's vocal on that's great. It's just kind of the sincerity of the song really rings true for me. But then the album opens with an immigrant song, which is a classic, and then Since I've Been Loving You is the
Hmm.
great blues run for Jimmy Page. That's one they used to do live. So, and I think Out on the Tiles might be the deep cut of the album.
Yeah, that's definitely one that didn't really get the true love that it deserves for sure. Definitely. Well, I had number three, unfortunately, a lot higher. It looks like I had mine at number six. So, but it was neck and neck with everything around it. So,
Yeah.
that's how tight of a race it was here for me to decide. It was definitely closer to the lower end. The better, the lower the number than it was the higher number. Even though it ended up at number six, oddly enough. But when you got that many great albums, it's really hard to try to slice them up and dice them. That's basically what I did.
Yeah.
But like you had mentioned, yeah, that's the way. I mean, it's my favorite Zeppelin song off of this album for sure.
Yeah.
And Tangerine's another highlight of the album. Um, Celebration Day, that was another one that little different for him. That was one of the more rocking songs on the album, along with Immigrant Song. Like you said, the rest of it has kind of like an acoustic flavor. Or,
Yeah.
Since I've Been Loving You is definitely my favorite Led Zeppelin blues song. There's no doubt
Mm-hmm.
about that.
Yeah.
Nothing. That's definitely the best overall blues song by Zeppelin. I don't think they ever topped that one for sure. And yeah, so that's basically what I got for it. I mean, I wasn't too keen on some of the Gallows Pose okay.
Yeah.
Hats off to Roy Harper, not exactly my cup of tea.
No, yeah, that's probably the weakest song on the album for me.
That's probably why it brought it down a little bit for me, just because the other albums had more
Hmm.
solid, songs that you wouldn't really skip or anything like that. But this one, I probably would skip it if I was in the wrong mood or something. But well, the songs that I mentioned, though, great songs. Every
Hmm.
album can't be perfect, that's for sure.
And my
But
friend,
still, great album. All right, so that means we both got our final one here,
yeah,
and
yeah, my number one is Physical Graffiti. It's the double album. I think at the time people thought it was kind of maybe, but it feels bloated, but because it's kind of a wide array of styles that they used. But to me, when I want to hear Led Zeppelin, this is the album I go to, which just kind of represents the best of what they did, just all across the board. All their influences kind of come through on this album. I mean, Cashmere is the big song for the radio for this album, but there's all you got. In My Time of Dying is great. In the Light is a great deep track that doesn't really get any radio play at all. But and then you got the Wanton song is great. That's one that I think Page and Plant did during their tour together in the '90s.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, 10 Years Gone is tremendous. It's just so many killer tracks. I mean, the album opens with Custard Pie, which is a great Jimmy Page riff too. So
Yep. For this album, for me, it came in at number 3. And I was kind of surprised because I really thought it would probably be my number 1. But when I actually went down and, went through it,
mm-hmm.
that's when I noticed that it wasn't quite as high as I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be number 1, but many of the things you mentioned on there definitely 10 Years Gone, definitely I think probably my favorite song on the album by far. Song that doesn't get too much love, Sick Again. When they did this tour, there was a bunch of bootlegs out from the LA shows that really, really were awesome. I really liked that the Badge Holders concert, I think they were calling it, one of them. Um, the Rover, that's another song that seems like the radio doesn't really pick up as many as this album went up as high. Sold, let's see if I remember right, 16 times platinum.
Yeah,
For a double album, that's phenomenal.
yeah, mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know how many double albums have sold more copies than this one, but I would bet you this would probably be one of the top 5, in the whole thing, at least out of studio albums are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And Cashmere, like you mentioned, that was the first song that always seems to get the mention and the love from this album. Everybody seems to tend to go to, but like you had mentioned, In the Light, great song. And like you said, the variety on this album really makes it unique and special. I really like Black Country Woman. I remember Robert Plant did that during that Atlantic Records 40th anniversary during his solo part of the show. He added that one in there, and that was pretty cool. And Down by the Seaside, another song that it just never gets a lot of airplay or love or mention.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely one of the highlights on the album that I always tend to lean towards.
Yeah. I think the only other song that may have been somewhat of a radio hit was "Trampled Underfoot." That's that occasionally.
Yes, that was I almost forgot about that one. You
Yeah.
just mentioned that one out of the nowhere there. That was yeah. So the ones that seem like you mentioned, those two were the ones that usually got the airplay. House of the Holy, I think over the last 15 years or so, finally started getting the airplay at least up here. And it's still weird how you usually don't hear In the Light on the radio or 10 Years Gone or
I know.
usually don't hear a lot of that stuff up here, which is kind of surprising. You'll hear Custard Pie once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
In My Time of Dying, they might pull out every once in a blue moon, but
Yeah.
I think that's why me and you tend to go back to this album a lot. Like I said, I thought it would be higher. It's got such a good variety, and nothing's really overplayed on it, really, which hard to believe considering how long it's been around for. So yeah, so that was a surprise for me that it wasn't number 1, but for me it was number 3, and for you at number 1 there.
Yeah. It was a tough call, but I once I think I feel pretty good about the pick. So.
Yeah, yeah. I was just shocked that it wasn't number 1 for me, but I gotta rank them as I see them, and at least as of today, I see that as my third favorite Zeppelin album. Surprisingly.
Yeah, I mean, if we do it again in 6 months, it could be a completely different list. So,
Yeah, definitely. So, well, yeah. So, anything else you want to mention about Zeppelin here?
um, no, I mean, I know the 97 Rock, they do that Get the Let Out show on Sunday nights, and that's usually the only time you would hear anything that's not like your standard radio cut. So,
Yeah, it's true. The Now we weren't gonna rank Coda because it wasn't a part of the thing, but what do you like off Coda? Just give it a little mention here. Are there any songs on there that you are glad that that got to see the light of day?
Yeah, I honestly I haven't listened to Coda in a long time. I'd have to really go back and I mean I think I listened to the song remains the same or the How the West Was Won live albums more than I listened to Coda.
Oh, yeah, that's a great album, that live album, yeah. Yeah, well, just to mention Coda for a couple of the people who
Mhm.
might be interested in Coda. Obviously, a lot of it were rare tracks and outtakes on from through the outdoor had a bunch of outtakes on it.
Yeah.
I would say Wearing and Tearing was one of the highlights of the album. That was a song that actually Plant and Page did. They did it at Nebworth, I believe. Later on down the road, it was in the early '90s. They played that song one time live.
Mhm.
And then Ozone Baby seemed to be the one track the radio would play every once in a while when it first came out.
Yeah.
You know, that's another highlight. Darlene, and then like on this reissued CDs, they actually put on the classic B side of the Immigrant Song with "Hey Hey, What Can I Do," which to me that's like one of the ultimate B sides ever.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's just
They
one of
do
those great songs.
that on the radio occasionally.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's just one of those great songs that when you hear it, it just sounds so good to hear it. I
Yeah, I
remember.
think the first time I heard that song, I didn't even realize it was a B side, but
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was weird. I mean, 97 Rock used to play it a fair amount. I don't know how they do anymore, but it was definitely, heard around here, not overplayed, but you would hear it every now and then, and that was a treat I felt because it wasn't overplayed, like I said, and it was great to hear something freshing on the radio when they usually focused on the same 10 songs throughout the whole 8 albums.
Mhm.
That's thankful they had something like Get the Let Out because it helps you. Like I said, it brings back the lesser known songs, so you're not hearing the same old songs all the time. So yeah, so other than that, definitely one of the greatest catalogs, you'll ever come across. I mean, there's not too many that are gonna have, eight tough albums to rank. I mean, this was tough. I mean, it's amazing we even hit home on some of the albums exactly,
Yeah.
so to do that, that was pretty good actually.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah, I mean, they're one of those bands I wish they could have been able to continue with more material, but because
oh,
Jimmy Page, his solo material has really been next to nothing since the band ended. So
yeah, and Robert Plant just came to like pick up without any issue. Obviously he's not as popular solo as he was with Zeppelin, but if you listen to those first 5 solo albums or so of his, man,
yeah.
there's a great handful of songs off of each album that
Mhm.
just great songs, just great songs. All right, well, that should conclude our issue for today, our ranking of the Led Zeppelin catalog here. Make sure you guys leave your favorites in the comments and everything, and we'll leave Dave's website address on there for you guys, so that way you guys can check it out and see some more of his writing and work and stuff and his interviews. And it'd be great to have you back again. We'll do some other band and go
Yeah,
through the.
sounds good. I'd love to come back again. I can talk bands all day. So
All right. Well, it's great having you.